This is by far the craziest full moon that I've ever seen. The aspects that we're going to be seeing, so precise, so exact during this specific full moon. It's happening right next to Pluto in Aquarius, highlighting that planet's intense transit through that sign. There's so much here to unpack. Let's get right into it. I'm Shane with Twin Links Astrology. This is a new channel. I decided to jump right into the deep end by tackling this very intense lunation, but we are going to take a look at it and see just what we can expect. I'm going to be going over what I think the collective energies are. We're going to take a look at the Sibly chart for the United States. I will say that I think on an individual level, there is a potential for tremendously powerful, transformative, extraordinary results out of this lunation cycle. It's going to be different for everybody, but I do see that despite what appear to be some real challenges, I think that we can expect a lot of good to come of it as well. And it's also, to me, it looks like it's going to be foreshadowing the eclipse season, which in and of itself is also intense. I'm going to be doing videos separately on the solar eclipse in Leo in August and the Pisces eclipse, the lunar eclipse in Pisces at the end of August. So I'll be getting those videos out shortly, but for right now, it's all about the full moon because I think it's going to provide a lot of clues about what to expect in the near future. Okay, so to start out, I want to point out what I think is the most powerful charge aspect, and this is the Jupiter-Sun cazimi. Now, cazimis happen with the sun and every planet once a year because the sun goes through the whole zodiac over the course of a year. So cazimis themselves are not a rare event. However, when they coincide with a full moon exact, the sun is 5 arc minutes away from this aspect perfecting, right? It's coming off of the perfection, but it just literally happened a matter of hours, if not less, before this full moon. Now, Jupiter is the planet of spirituality, religion, expansion, broadening horizons. It does well in the sign of Leo. It's friends with the sun. They're both diurnal planets. They both rule fire signs. Jupiter is the daytime ruler of the fire triplicity of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So Jupiter likes being in Leo, and it likes the sun. What does this mean on a collective level? Well, the sun on an individual level represents our egos, right? We all have the sun somewhere in our chart, and that represents the self, the main character, if you will. And when Jupiter is in an exact cazimi, it can be larger than life themes. Jupiter being religious, there is a long documented history of Jupiter and Leo being associated with popes, with papal actions, with the church hierarchy, the Vatican, right? Because we have the sun, which represents authority. We've got Jupiter representing religion. So these two together, religious authority is a big theme that we do see with Jupiter and Leo. I'm sorry, Jupiter and the sun, especially in the sign of Leo. It doesn't have to be in Leo, but it's highlighted because Leo is ruled by the sun. I do think that it's a powerful aspect, but this can also be cults, cult leaders, religious fanaticism, right? Because Jupiter expands and the sun is about power. And this could be grabbing power under the pretense of religion. And it doesn't have to be even pretentious. It could be very sincerely held beliefs that nevertheless are used for power plays, power grabs, all that sort of stuff. So religion, power is one theme we can expect. Now, this is not happening in a vacuum. And the reason why I do think that false pretenses, potential for there to be some subversive or, fanaticism, perhaps some sort of religious misappropriation, the abuse of religion in order, or spirituality as well, in order to gain power and control, or to the formation of cults, is that we have this trine from Neptune. And this trine from Neptune is very much still within 3 degrees, so it's still in play. It's fading. This is the one of the weaker aspects, but Neptune is still there. It is still sending energies to Leo from Aries, and Neptune is a planet of illusion, fraud, swindling, scamming. So it's something to watch out for. This is a time, this whole year, and I think we've seen this play out quite literally over the course of the past year, is we really have needed to use our discernment in finding out what is real and what's not, because some of what is happening in the world just, it doesn't pass the laugh test. It's like, it's so absurd that it's like, is it true? Is it not? This is something where we really have to be careful of what people are saying. We need to lean into our intuition. We need to lean into what that voice inside is saying. So the challenge here, though, is that we don't have a lot of earth energy grounding this full moon. The only planet that is in an earth sign is Venus. This Venus is not in good shape. Venus is debilitated in Virgo, so she does not do well in this sign as it is. Now, if it were just Venus in Virgo, that would not be a huge deal, right? Venus is in Virgo once a year, generally, and we can work with it. But not only is she in Virgo, but she is getting a superior square from Mars. This is a tough, exacting aspect that takes a toll on Venus. So she is not in good shape right now. We're going to unpack what this means, because this is part, as you can see, of a greater formation. And this is the Iron Yod, featuring the moon, to a lesser extent Pluto at the apex. These two aspects here are sesquiquadrates. These are basically a square and a half, so 90 degrees plus 45, so a square and a half. This aspect, the sesquiquadrate, is not an aspect that I normally pay attention to. It's considered a minor aspect, working more in the background, and really isn't going to produce by itself the same effects. However, there are a couple things that are different about this particular sesquiquadrate. Because the square is exact, right? 7 arc minutes out. So this aspect perfected, again, hours before. The aspects to the moon are within, it may not look, because you have to add 135, but if you do the math, it is 3 arc minutes out from Venus and Mars. So they are both aspecting this full moon exactly. So we have this formation that looks basically like a bisected isosceles triangle. And the sesquiquadrate aspect is of the same nature as a square. By itself, it would be considered almost like a milder, less potent square. But when you have it in this aspect between planets that are already squaring each other very, very tensely, very precisely, you are getting friction, you are getting tensions boiling over, you are getting a pressure cooker situation. And the apex is this full moon. It is our emotions, it is our feelings on a collective level. In the charts of countries, the moon represents the people. So this is going to be an extremely emotional period for many, many people. And we don't have a lot of energy grounding this full moon. We just don't. Venus is going to do her best to provide that energy, but she is being decimated right now. She is not at her strongest, and she cannot prevent unfortunate outcomes in a way that she otherwise might be. Jupiter, on the other hand, is in a much better position. So there's that. I would be more concerned if we had both planets, both benefic planets, severely debilitated. That's not the case. However, it is almost all fire and air energy in the sky right now. So that is something to be mindful of. Now, we also have this Barbalt's basket still very much in play, right? It became exact, I believe, on the 19th, but it is still very close, still within 3 degrees of the outer planets. And I think that anything that occurs during the basket with Jupiter is going to come to a head during this full moon. So we want to pay attention to what happens the week and a half leading up to the full moon, because we can most likely expect those themes to be fully manifested as of this full moon. Now, going back to the moon itself, again, on an individual level, this represents our feelings, our emotional landscape, and it is right next to Pluto, which is the most intense planet astrologically you can get. That is intensifying emotions. It is intensifying the magnitude of what is going on. And I also need to point out that this is occurring in a fixed sign. This is not, or I'm sorry, Aquarius is a fixed sign, Leo is a fixed sign. So there's a lot of friction here, a lot of not wanting to budge, but being forced to nevertheless. So the way I can see this playing out is truths that we are being pressed to deal with, and then it's going to be uncomfortable emotionally, right? But nevertheless, we're going to have to adapt, right? Venus and Mars, mutable signs, right? They're adaptable. They roll with the punches. You've got to be able to adapt. The moon isn't going to want to do it, but we've got these two mutable planets that are forcing her hand in this. Now, what we also see is Saturn and Mercury are largely unaspected, right? Just in the sky in terms of what's going on between planet and planet. They are sitting this one out, really. And it's interesting because Saturn is a traditional ruler of Aquarius. He's ruling this lunation. Saturn just went in retrograde. I want to say like the day before this full moon. Mercury has just come out of retrograde. It's still in its retrograde shadow. It's not aspecting anything. It recently got the sextile from Venus, but it's moving slow. It's sluggish. It's coming out of its retrograde period, and it is really not able to moderate what is going on. It can't see Mars. They're in aversion. It is really just not in a position to govern the signs that it rules right now in a real effective way. So why is this important? Well, Saturn represent? It represents structure, discipline, authority, right? It is, uh, traditionally it was the furthest planet that the ancients could see with the naked eye. And so it was considered as the bounds of what is real. Mercury, the cerebral thinking logical side, it's the side of us that thinks logically, thinks rationally, right? And so these two planets, what do they have in common? Well, they're both pretty down to earth, and I don't want to say it because it's not necessarily earth energy, but they represent rationality, right? Structure, authority, you know, it's very based in reality. And the fact that these two planets, right, are sitting this lunation, this full moon out, says a lot. What to me that indicates is that we're going to have to suspend our reality in some way. It's things are not going to necessarily make logical, rational sense, which underscores the importance of intuition, right? Of listening to your gut, what feels right. Because logic is not going to be a prominent feature of this full moon. It is just not likely to make sense. So if we can just expect for things to just be absolutely absurd or unbelievable, it may require, again, some suspension of disbelief. And how that exactly plays out, I'm not really prepared to say specifically because these are just unprecedented aspects. I think we'll get a hint of it during this upcoming, in the weeks leading up to it, starting on the 19th. But as far as, what does this all mean? There's just no precedent for this. We also see this trine from Uranus. Now, all the outer planets are aspecting this full moon still, but we've got Pluto and Neptune retrograde. So Saturn is retrograde, Mercury coming out of retrograde. So Uranus is the only one that is direct. And to me, Uranus is unexpected. It's a planet of shocking, disruptive, unexpected changes. And trines from Uranus are not like trines from other planets. We often see trines as being a good thing, and I think that in many contexts they can be, but it's just flowing energy. That's all it is. It's easy flowing energy between two planets. Now, when Uranus is involved, it's a planet of shocking, disruptive changes, and you don't need a square from Uranus for that to manifest. This means actually that there's an easy pipeline for Uranian energy to basically light up this lunation cycle. If anything, the trine makes it easier. Now, unexpected doesn't always mean bad, especially in the sign of Gemini. And I think that Uranus is playing the role of Mercury and Saturn. It is taking over because, in modern astrology, Uranus is considered a higher octave of Mercury. Uranus is also considered the modern ruler of Aquarius, which is Saturn's traditional sign. So we see Uranus sort of stepping in, Saturn and Mercury taking a step back. But I still think that of all the outer planets, Uranus is speaking loudest to the moon, to the lunation, even more so than Pluto, because Pluto is retrograde. So Uranus is a close planet to watch. And by extension, it's also completing the closest sextile to the Jupiter-Sun cazimi of all the outer planets. So this could be, this throws a wild card into this cazimi as well, right? Unexpected shifts, unexpected twists and turns, unexpected changes in religious authority. Uranus is stirring things up, but not necessarily in a bad way. I do see challenges to the order of things being a theme. I really want to take a quick look at the US Sibly chart because the way that it's being activated here is really quite crazy. And we see just a number of parts of that chart being activated. So let's take a quick look at it. What I want to point out, just looking at the chart by itself, this is widely considered as the birth chart of the United States. It features a Sagittarius rising, right, ruled by Jupiter, who is in a cazimi with the sun. In the Sibly chart, the sun is pretty close to Jupiter. So that in and of itself is something to be mindful of, right? The proximity to Jupiter. In this case, Jupiter is under the beams. It's not cazimi, but it's akin to what we're seeing in the sky. What else do we see? We see the moon in Aquarius, 27 degrees of Aquarius. So again, this Aquarius full moon, the US has it in its natal chart. When we see patterns repeat in the sky in such a extraordinary fashion as I do in the natal chart, it's time to definitely pay attention. What else do we see? We see here an iron yod. Now, granted, this is not exact, nowhere near as exact as the iron yod that we see between Venus and Mars during the full moon, but we have the sun squaring Saturn, both of them in a sesquiquadrate aspect to the moon at the apex. So the similarities here are, it's pretty remarkable. We're seeing certain patterns being replicated. And we also have Mercury right there in Cancer. Mercury is in Cancer right now. Retrograde, right? Mercury's not retrograde during the full moon, but it's still in its shadow. Where's Mars? Right now in the sky, 21 degrees of Gemini. Venus is not in Virgo, but Uranus is in Gemini right now. We are seeing a number of things being activated, and I'll highlight this for you. Let me do the bi-wheel chart. So what we're seeing here is just how many planets are being activated. In the Sibly chart, Saturn is at 1448 of Libra. Here, right now, it is transiting retrograde, just turned retrograde, 1444 of Aries, 4 arc minutes, right? Mars, 4 arc minutes out of its Mars return. Saturn's a little bit further out, but we're still seeing a very tight recurrence. We're seeing a lot of recurrences here. Where is the transiting North Node? The North Node represents incoming cosmic energy on the natal full moon in Aquarius. And where is the natal South Node? Well, it is at the natal axis of the nodes, 635 of Leo in Aquarius. This is exactly where the full moon is occurring. The South Node is the release point. North Node is incoming energy. The nodes, when the nodes are involved, whether it's a transiting axis or planets transiting the natal axis, it is going to trigger fated events. That's just what the nodes do. Now, the North Node is, again, a point of increase. I actually like seeing the Sun-Jupiter cazimi on the North Node of the United States. I actually think it's a good thing. It could manifest, the North Node represents, on an individual level, it represents our appetite, our drive, what we are striving for, the direction we're moving towards. It can go over the top sometimes. We see prominent figures with lots of planets conjunct the North Node. I'm not going to go into examples, but it can often manifest as this insatiable appetite, a bottomless abyss, a black hole that it doesn't matter what you throw down it, it's never going to be enough. But on a collective level, I see this as being positive energy that is coming in to the collective on a collective level. And the south node represents what, on an individual level, we need to let go of. And what we're seeing here is a release. There's some sort of release associated with the moon here. There needs to be some emotional weight, emotional baggage that needs to be cleared on a collective level. And Pluto is really confirming that. Pluto is a planet of radical transformation. It is a planet of having to go through this renewal, cleansing renewal, and that requires shedding baggage. What's interesting though is that the transiting north node is in Aquarius. And again, the moon represents the people. So what we're seeing here is the people are gaining something here during this full moon. It represents an increase, right? It's like we need to give up the old here to make room for the new. This is what I think is the major theme on a collective level. But to get into just the nitty-gritty of some of this, in the Sibly chart, this lunation happening in the third house. On a national level, the third house represents transportation, communications, the media. It represents railways. It represents highways. It represents short distance travel. It could also even include air travel, but communication, the internet, technology. You could even throw components of AI in this house, especially with it being in Aquarius. We do see a lot of these themes playing out. The grid, for example, is third house topic. And the north node, again, it's incoming energy. The transiting north node is in Aquarius. And it has been described as often being like a power surge. So I think for people, for the collective, on a collective level, I see this as being a positive. It's going to be transformative. There's going to be an emotional component to the energies of this full moon, but I actually do think that there's tremendous spiritual implications here, not just because of the Jupiter Sun cazimi, but because of the outer planets, because of the lack of energy, in the Sibly chart, the Saturn is exalted in the 11th house Libra, but is under an opposition from a fallen Saturn in Aries. And this Saturn is the one that is in the sky right now. So Mars return. It's just another indication of the activations that we're seeing. Now, Mars and Uranus in the seventh house. The seventh house on a national level represents foreign relations, foreign governments. It does refer to war. We are currently at war with Iran. The US has been at war with Iran. And in Gemini here, with Uranus trining the moon in the third house, this in the south node, this could be, one just example, and not saying that this could happen or this will happen, but one way this could manifest is the leaking of, shocking, unexpected information by a foreign government, right? That's one way I could see this play out. It doesn't mean that will happen. It's just the themes, right? Foreign government communication. It's just as simple as that. I'm just sort of speculating here. I'm just being hypothetical, really. We see Mars also, Mars squaring Venus in the 10th house. This is a public house, and I'm using whole sign houses. That's what I use. But this, Venus is in a very public spot right now, and she's not in good shape. Like I said earlier, this Venus is not happy. She's not happy, and she is fairly close to the midheaven here. And 10th house is all about public, it's about well known people, right? Venus traditionally, refers to high authority women. I don't necessarily think that it is only women. I think that it is, Venus represents feminine energies. We all have feminine and masculine energies, but I do think that, this is high profile people. And when we see Mars squaring Venus in this very tense T square, and also Venus is squaring the natal Mars, right? Because Mars is right there from the seventh house, is that this is often associated with very public scandals with Mars and Venus, right? Traditionally, we got male, female. This could denote some sort of breakup, high profile divorce or split, something like that. I think that could be one of the more minor aspects. We also have the sun and Jupiter at the midpoint of this square. And so we can't rule out a religious, spiritual component to it. I think, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that Venus and Mars represent masculine and feminine energies. And I think part of what we can expect with this full moon is themes highlighting a need to integrate and temper and synthesize the discordant masculine and feminine energies of, on an individual level, on a collective level. So many of the problems that I think we see in the world have to do with an imbalance of feminine and masculine, right? When we talk about toxic masculinity, that is imbalance, right? It's an imbalance of masculinity versus femininity. And again, this is not about males versus females. It's about, on an individual level, have we integrated both those sides? Because we all have both. We all do. On a collective level, though, I think what we might be seeing is some tension there. Unfortunately, we do see Mars in the superior position. So I think that, that isn't great. But we also have a lot more things going on. And Uranus, I'll tell you, no planet embodies masculine and feminine energies in a non-dualistic way, more so than Uranus. And Uranus is trining the moon. So there's counterbalancing energies here. I don't think it's going to be as reductive as masculine versus feminine. There's more going on. It's more nuanced than that. And beyond that, one thing that I do see, because Venus does represent values, it's not the only planet I think that would indicate financial themes, but it is in an earth sign. It is Venus. Venus is historically associated with financial issues, so that could come up, but I don't know if that is going to be a major focus. Besides that, with Uranus in the seventh, this is a theme of Uranus in the seventh. It's Uranus in Gemini, Mars in Gemini, in the house of foreign powers, foreign countries. It could be the deployment of a new technology, right? A new technology by a foreign government that is unprecedented, something like that. It's going to be part of if it does, it's likely to be a unfolding chapter with the AI saga. Neptune and Aries in the fifth house. But generally, I see the focus here being on the people, right? On the people. And it's going to, again, I think as a collective, we are going to be required to deal with perhaps shocking, unexpected twists that may not even seem real or very hard to digest. And this is, by the way, not necessarily specific to the United States because the moon in any country's chart represents the people. It just happens to be acutely activated in this chart, but even the transiting moon, full moons are, it's something that I think it's going to go beyond just the US. It's going to have global, it's going to be felt on a global level. But I do think that there is going to be, and especially with Gemini being so activated, which is the exchange of information, the moon in this chart being in the third house, that it's going to be, can I process this information that is coming in? And I see that as being a major theme. Beyond that, I, fixed full moons. This isn't an eclipse, but it's foreshadowing eclipse season. This is the last full moon before we start getting eclipses. And there's always a potential for seismic activity. Pluto is often associated with volcanology. With it being in fire and air signs, a lot of times big earthquakes we see along Earth water axes, especially Taurus Scorpio, which is, both of these houses are largely empty with the exception of Chiron, which is just very much at the beginning of Taurus. But I don't want to say that it is a likelihood because I don't see any remarkable indicators of extraordinary seismic activity, but it's always a possibility, especially in fixed lunations. So, something to keep in mind. We do have some Earth energy, tense Earth energy coming from this debilitated Venus, but again, I don't think that alone would be enough. The trine from Uranus sometimes is associated with seismic activity because a trine is a release point, right? It's a release flowing energy. So that can actually, people think squares and oppositions are associated with Earth. The trine can, it's still energy. And if something is built up, that could be a possibility. But again, I'm not thinking that it's likely, but it's something to just keep in mind. That's pretty much what I had for you guys. I do think that it's going to be a pretty intense full moon, but I think that on an individual level, it could actually be quite positive. And I'm going to be releasing a video of individual horoscopes based on your rising sign. So if you found this video informative, check out my channel. Hopefully in the next couple days, I will have that video uploaded so you have an idea of what to expect in your personal horoscope based on your birth chart. So that said, if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. Obviously, this is a brand new channel, so I really would appreciate the support. And as always, please stay safe, and we will catch you next time. Take care.